We are on the morning break in the questioning of HN58, the former Detective Chief Inspector of the Special Demonstration Squad between 1997 and 2001. The day started with him doing his homework, the reflecting on the answers he gave 2 days ago now about Mark Jenner's living arrangements. He explained to admitting that he thought it was unusual, but there was no reason not to do it, so he just carried on. He was informed that the document in question was, we've been told by Lambert, was full of errors due to Lambert's own mistakes. He claimed he was unaware of that. He was then, I think quite significantly, asked again about the deployment of HN81 into the Movement for Justice, and particularly about the fact that this was clearly not about Movement for Justice. And he agreed that finally, after avoiding the question for 2 days, he agreed that the infiltration Movement for Justice was just to have eyes and ears on the ground in Brixton and in Tottenham in order to report on protests in that area, including by Black family justice campaigns. Very significant, I feel. Very quickly kind of went through and not necessarily acknowledged particularly, but given how much he'd avoided that and kept blaming Movement for Justice, and it was all about Movement for Justice for the last 2 days, quite a turnaround. What did you make, before we get into the rest of it, what did you make of that?
Oh, quite, both quite significant. I think in the first one with the document, that's throw Lambert under the bus. That was a straight away. That was I'm not going to admit that he's still not going to admit that he knew in the face of reality. But he's got a convenient scapegoat, and Lambert's going to take the fall for everything.
Yes.
So he's another officer who's trying to give the impression that Lambert was running the show. He's the fall guy. The consequence, mate, you weren't doing your job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But on the
second, quite significant. There is a big question over the whole of that deployment. It was Movement for Justice was identified as the target group he's been switched to, the Legal Defence and Monitoring Group, a group that does legal defence and monitoring of police. So this is a group that would naturally have access to legally professional privileged material.
Yes.
So that in itself is pretty questionable. Only why would you send a group into that? They monitor the police. Why are you sending somebody into that?
Right.
It's not just about having a roving brief. It's having insight into the strategies of people challenging the police. So, we know that Brixton and Tottenham were some of the areas where police were most challenged for the outrageous racist slaughtering of the local community. Let's be clear. It's like Brixton and Tottenham and those areas where most deaths in police custody were happening. The police officers of those areas are murderers, without question. And even if they weren't directly involved in killing, they were complicit in covering it up, supporting the units. And now you have an undercover being basically sent in, spy on anybody who was going to challenge that. So we look at the whole thing yesterday about racially motivated crime. Who was committing the racially motivated crime? I think it was the police.
yeah, very much. We then got on to James Thompson's deployment, Operation Lime. We were shown the document that HN53 drafted about his concerns about the fictitious nature of the whole thing, and he claimed that throughout the process he'd been raising concerns. HN58 claimed no, he doesn't remember anything. He would have remembered if that was the case. He said there was no reservations that were coming from HN53. He personally had no reservations either about it, though he accepts that they were initially saying, oh no, but there was a revenge plot, and it's like, well, there's no evidence for it. There's no evidence for any revenge plot. It's clear that yes, the running over took place. Yes, that one of the Hunt Sabs was run over by a Hunt supporter, but everything from then on was purely based on James Thompson's own intelligence. Essentially, it was all fiction. We didn't even get into the weeds of it. I was expecting much more of that. We were taken through, the fact that James Thompson stole the identity of a dead child, Kevin Crossland. HN58 claimed not to have no knowledge of that. He claimed to have no knowledge of the multiple passports, no knowledge of the multiple driving licenses, the bank accounts, the credit cards. He just presents himself as completely clueless. He did agree that there was no rules about it. He claimed not to know about the Open University course, about the earnings on the side. Essentially, he presents himself as a complete innocent abroad and ignorant.
Very similar to Keith Edmondson.
Yes.
And we have and Dell does the thing. It's like we're going to try, but all detective chief inspectors who are throwing their detective inspectors under the buses. Yes, those detective inspectors are up to no good, but you can see the strategy is in the game plan play. Oh, it's my media superior who did all the work and stuff. It really was not credible. For a very start, they shared an office.
Yes.
There was no way a HN53 was doing all this work and not mentioning anything. And what 58 can't deal with is it's all documented.
Yeah.
It's all there on the papers. And we know from other questioning that they were constantly reading. Even if they weren't in the office, a file note would be written up for them to see. It's all on the papers. He's just denying reality.
Yeah. We then got into the deployment of HN60, who was deployed during the HN58's time. That's the cover named Dave Evans. He was put into the Socialist Workers' Party, but went on to infiltrate London Animal Action and the SHAC, the campaign against hunting and life sciences. What was particularly interesting about that, when we saw the targeting document, is that it seemed to be the result of a meeting with C Squad, where C Squad was asking for greater coverage of the Socialist Workers' Party because of demonstrations outside Downing Street. But there was also linked to an approach that was made by Unison, the trade union, complaining to the police that they had the union was being infiltrated by militant left-wingers, and also a request from John Prescott for the police's view of attacks on members of the government. And this was following him being drenched in water by members of Chumbawamba at the Brit Awards, quite famously. It was also, he was hit by an egg by support of the Countryside Alliance. I don't know, that wasn't brought up, but I mean, that was from the same period, I think.
But they're right-wingers, so they wouldn't matter.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, so these three things were put into the targeting document for why HN60, Dave Evans, was being targeted against the Socialist Workers' Party as the initial part of his deployment. It was pointed out that this was about subversion in the trade union movement. The security services were no longer interested in domestic subversion; they were just on a watching brief. And then we will show the flowchart of where SDS intelligence would end up, and the diagram included the Cabinet Office. And it was asked, was this interest in subversion in industrial relations something the Cabinet Office was interested in? HN58 claimed to have no knowledge of that at all. He said he couldn't help in the least. He didn't know anything about any connection with the Cabinet Office. And that kind of went nowhere from there, really. But I thought it was very interesting.
The problem with the SDS is you don't know how much they're actually making stuff up in order to just they are very quick to latch on to anything that will justify their operation, including public order. So hey, this can maybe justify our existence now for our drink, the fact that we can go drinking every day of the week and get paid for it. So it's you've always got to take these things with a pinch of salt. But and the other thing on the whole trade union, we've had plenty of evidence. There was no industrial test. We haven't had that since the 70s. There was no training. We weren't allowed to spy on trade unions. That wasn't allowed. It's like, can you get your story straight? Because it seems just like there's no, when it comes to the public, you will say this happened. But as soon as it's convenient for you inside the unit, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, it was very open about spying on industrial relations, really. Then we got into HN77, Jackie Anderson, and her deployment. We were shown the psychological assessment that showed that she had very low or no moral ethical standards, that no bottom tier just how awful she was generally. And then he said, the psychological assessment was just one step. And we knew the candidate, so we had her for the interview, and we were quite happy with what she said, so she was deployed.
Two things there. One, how much these psychological things had just become a tick boxing exercise.
Yeah.
It's like, the welfare, we're doing these things. Like, it was probably brought in for good reasons because there were serious issues in the unit. But in classic case, management went, okay, well, that just covers our ass. We don't really care. Second thing is like, okay, yes, you were measuring for integrity. On paper, that looks like you were looking for high integrity. Never say high integrity. You get the suspicion the fact that she failed was supposed to be seen as a good thing.
Yeah, maybe.
Look at the rest of the unit. The evidence is integrity was not. High integrity was not high.
No.
among them. So if she failed, I'm sure that loads of the others failed.
Yeah, yeah. And there was we were taken to her exfiltration document, where she said she'd got rid of it, she'd handed back in her mobile phone, and then she said, "I've told the scumbags I'm anti-mobile now, and I can just contact them by phone boxes." And we were just shown the way in which the term wearies was used in the interview documents, in the scenarios that were presented to the officers when they were being recruited. And really that culture, it was admittance by HN58 that the culture of like derision towards activists was there from the very start. Before officers were even deployed, they were already like encouraged to use derogatory terms about activists.
But I don't think this is just about the SES.
No, you know, special branch in general.
There's a whole culture, you know, it's like, you know, the overarching focus on the left wing, you know, something trying to talk a lot more about is just how ideological special branches, you know, and you had Dell and a few others were particularly strong. No, we were about the Queen's peace, we were about being equal and stuff. That's when you hit bar really nicely on the mind that, but when I was like, no, the way you spoke about people was inherently biased, you know. This myth of neutrality that they like the special branch likes to play. There's so much else they said, it's just bollocks.
Yeah, that's a bollocks. We were just getting into the just before we went to the break. We were just getting into the code of conduct and serious crime, the RIPA authorizations, kind of showing what the level was for serious criminality that would require an authorization. And it was pointed out that if it was about public order, the threshold would have to be riot. I think we're going to explore that a lot more when we go back in. It's only a short break. We should probably go in fairly soon. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think that this is quite an amazing thing. It's like it's the first time it's really being pulled out what the thresholds are, you know, in this new regulation. And riot is a really massively high bar.
Massively high.
In law, riot has to be formally declared, and there's massive consequences for it. This is because the government has to then to pay for all the damage costs. There's legal consequences. It's just like, that's really high, and there's a riot probably once every 10 years on average in the UK. It's rare.
Very rare, and in the majority of those cases, they're not classified as riots. I mean, like, you know, I remember at one point there hadn't been one for like 100 years or something. When, you know, there are huge periods of time where, you know, some of the famous riots are not classed as riots, like legally, for those reasons.
There's a precise definition of riot. It's not just a word that, you know, it's like keeping the peace. It's not a word that to me anything. It's everything. So for them to set that high a bar, that makes the rest of the justification really weak grounds.
Better go back in. Thanks for everybody who's sharing and liking. Really appreciate it. Do another one of these videos at lunchtime. I have a bit more time to do it then. There was a breach this morning, so the broadcast was suspended. I do apologize for. I don't know why I'm apologizing. I'm not apologizing. You can follow things on Twitter as they're happening by my tweets. That's probably the only way when these breaches happen. Thanks for joining. We'll see you.